All right, does everybody have the lesson this morning? We're looking at Joshua's Ai. Now you will remember last time we looked at Jericho, and the very next city of the conquest was the city of Ai, which is further west and just a little north of where Jericho is. And you will remember that Joshua sent in a small group of soldiers, 3,000, and they were beaten by the men of Ai because of the sin of Achan. And we read about that in Joshua chapter 7. I want us to turn to Joshua chapter 8, and I think really the best thing to do is just to read this story, and then we're going to be looking at the presentation this morning from Joel Kramer on the controversy concerning the city of Ai. And so let's look at Joshua chapter number 8, and we'll just read through this. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear not. And the reason he said that, of course, they just got beat, and there's 36 men of Israel that got killed because of Achan's sin. And of course, they just dealt with Achan's sin. And now what do we do next? Well, we've got to go back to Ai. And so the Lord says to Joshua, Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war with thee, and arise and go up to Ai. See, I have given it into thy hand, the king of Ai and his people, and his city and his land. And thou shalt do to Ai and her king as thou didst unto Jericho and her king, only the spoil thereof and the cattle thereof shall ye take for a prey unto yourselves. Lay thee an ambush for the city behind it. So, Jericho, they were to touch anything, but Ai is different. They can take the spoil of the city. Verse 3, So Joshua arose and all the people of war to go against Ai, and Joshua chose out 30,000 men of valor, and sent them away by night. And he commanded them, saying, Behold, ye shall lie in wait against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but ye shall, be ye all ready. And then all the people that are with me will approach unto the city, and it shall come to pass when they come out against us, as at the first, that we will flee before them, and for they will come out after us, till we have drawn them from the city. For they will say, They flee before us, as at the first, therefore we will flee before them. Then ye shall rise up from the ambush, and seize upon the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And it shall be that when ye have taken the city, that ye shall set the city on fire, according to the commandment of the Lord shall ye do. See, I have commanded you. Joshua therefore sent them forth, and they began to lie in ambush, and abode between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. And Joshua rose up early in the morning, and numbered the people, and went up, he and the elders of Israel, before the people to Ai. And all the people, even the people of war that were with him, went up and drew nigh, and came before the city, and pitched on the north side of Ai. Now there was a valley between them and Ai. And he took about 5,000 men, and set them to lie in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. And when they had set the people, even all the host that was on the north of the city, and their liers in wait on the west of the city, Joshua went that night unto the midst of the valley. Now, he's setting this thing up where it's really a pincer movement. And you'll notice on your map there, on your notes there, that they all came from Gilgal. Gilgal was their base. And they're traveling from about 1,500 feet below sea level to about 2,500 feet above sea level. So it's all uphill going to Ai, but they split. And so 5,000 men went to the south of the city, and then went around kind of on the west side, the southwest side. And this will be evident to you once we look at the video and the representation of the topography. But the main army is across, so Ai is on a hillside, and then there's a valley, and then on the north side of the valley is another hillside, and that's where Joshua has his main army. So when they come out toward Ai, the men of Ai go out to battle again, and Joshua feigns a retreat, so he's running away toward down into the Jordan Valley again. And so they draw all the men out of Ai, and also the city of Bethel. And when all the men went out after Joshua, then the people who were lying in ambush, they went into the city and set the thing on fire. So then the men of Ai are looking behind them. They're seeing their city on fire, and they stop chasing Joshua, and they go back to defend the city. And then, of course, the men who set the city on fire, they're coming out of the city, and it's a pincer movement between Joshua, who's now on the advance, on the attack, and so the men of Ai are trapped in between, and all of them get killed. 12,000 from the inhabitants of Ai are killed. Verse 14, and it came to pass when the king of Ai saw it, that they hasted, rose up early, and the men of the city went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people at the time appointed, before the plain. But he wist not that there were liers in ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them, and they fled by the way of the wilderness. And all the people that were in Ai were called together to pursue after them. And they pursued after Joshua, and were drawn away from the city. And there was not a man left in Ai or Bethel that went not out after Israel. And they left the city open, and pursued after Israel. And the Lord said unto Joshua, stretch out the spear that is in thine hand toward Ai, for I will give it into thine hand. And Joshua stretched out the spear that he had in his hand toward the city. And the ambush arose quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand. And they entered into the city, and took it, and hasted, and set the city on fire. When the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw, and behold, the smoke of the city ascended up to heaven, and they had no power to flee this way or that way. And the people that fled to the wilderness turned back upon the pursuers. That is, Joshua's army turned back upon the men of Ai. Verse 21, and when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, then they turned again and slew the men of Ai, and the other issued out of the city against them, so that they were in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side. And they smote them, so that they let none of them remain or escape. And the king of Ai they took alive, and brought him to Joshua. And it came to pass, when Israel had made an end of slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, in the wilderness wherein they chased them, and when they were all fallen on the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Israelites returned unto Ai, smote it with the edge of the sword. And so it was that all that fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, even all the men of Ai. For Joshua drew not his hand back. So Joshua had a spear pointed, and as long as he had the spear pointed, then the men were attacking Ai, until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the cattle and the spoil of the city Israel took for a prey unto themselves, according unto the word of the Lord which he commanded Joshua. And Joshua burnt Ai, and made it an heap forever. Now, when we get into the archaeology, if he burnt Ai just like he did Jericho, then you would expect to find the burn layer. Do you remember the burn layer? That's really important in the archaeology. Even a desolation unto this day. Verse 29, now here's a very important point that is made here. And the king of Ai, he hanged on a tree even until eventide, and as soon as the sun was down, Joshua commanded that they should take his carcass down from the tree, and cast it at the entering of the gate of the city, and raise thereon a great heap of stones that remaineth unto this day. So they killed the king of Ai, and then they cast his body into the gate, which would have been on the north side of the city, and then they covered the gateway and his body with stones, a great, great, great heap of stones. Now the place we're going to be looking at here, it's called Ethel, and the name Ethel means a ruinous heap. So the city was burned with fire, but also this particular feature of the gate of the city was covered with a ruinous heap of stones. The controversy of Ai, just like Jericho, there is much controversy as to the date of Ethel and its connection to Joshua's conquest. John Garstein, you remember he was the earlier archaeologist, and he dated the city of Ai to around Joshua's time at 1400 BC. Alternatively, and this is where the controversy comes in, a man by the name of Joseph Calloway of Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, studied Ethel from 1964 to 1970. Can anybody tell me something about Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky during the time of the 60s? Anybody know anything about that? Joe Gammon went to Southern Seminary in the 70s. Exactly right. Now, I think that's probably changed today, certainly in comparison. But during the 60s, Southern Seminary was a very liberal institution. That's why Joe is now an independent Baptist, because he started out as a Southern Baptist, went to Southern Seminary, and they were denying the miracles of the Bible. They were denying the fact that Jonah was swallowed by a literal great fish. And so he was disillusioned by that, although he did graduate from Southern Seminary. So anyway, this guy, Joseph Calloway, is out of there, and he's trained by Kathleen Kenyon. Do you remember her from last week? So, so he adopted many of her false notions on the dating of the pottery. And who knows really what his motives were. But he concluded that Ethel dated much earlier than Joseph's time. So Joel Kramer makes the point that late Iron Age pottery is found at the site. Okay, so he dates it much earlier, much earlier than Joseph's time. So what he's basically saying, when Joseph gets here, that there is no city there. Interestingly, you're going to find that in this archaeological dig that John Garstein did, around the city gates was a massive heap of stones. And they removed that heap of stones in order to find the city gate and so on. But what Joel, the arguments that he has is you do find the late Iron Age pottery with a destruction burn layer, and also the heap of stones found at the city gate. Also, the topography of the land and the location of the city fit very well the story of Joshua's conquest. I'm going to let him make the argument on that. I felt it was quite convincing. But again, there's just to let you know that even some of his colleagues will not agree with Joel on this. So there's still some controversy about the true location of Ai. But I'm pretty well convinced, because Joel has been there. He's actually, you'll see that he worked at the alternate site, and he just was not convinced with it at all. So there's he knows more about it than we do, of course. But anyway, we'll just let the video speak for itself. And so let's go ahead and run this now. Joshua's Ai.
Located roughly 12 miles north of Jerusalem were the two biblical cities of Bethel and Ai. This mound of ruins, known locally as Etel, has for a long time been identified as the ancient city of Ai, where the most descriptive battle in the Bible took place as part of the Israelite conquest of the Promised Land. In 1985, the Jewish scholar Zioni Zevit wrote an article entitled "The Problem of Ai," which well represented the majority view that the archaeological evidence excavated at Ai rejects the battle as described in the Bible. In short, wrote Dr. Zevit, the evidence shows that there was no city of Ai for the Israelites to conquer. The problem of Ai has to do with archaeology, and for a very long time, especially within evangelical Christian scholarship, this has been the biggest and most confusing challenge to the Bible. The first to excavate at Etel as Ai was the British archaeologist John Garstein, and he dug there in 1928. And the evidence that he found there, he said, confirmed the biblical account of the Battle of Ai. Then later, starting in 1964, Joseph Calloway excavated at Etel, and he said the exact opposite. He said the archaeological evidence he found contradicted the biblical account of Ai. And it was really confusing because there was no reason to think that Joseph Calloway was not being honest with what he found, because he was a Baptist seminary professor. Calloway wrote, "Ai is simply an embarrassment to every view of the conquest that takes the biblical and archaeological evidence seriously." What a strange thing for a Baptist seminary professor to say, that the biblical site that he's excavating is an embarrassment to those who believe in the Bible? So to our utter amazement, God opened the door and we were able in 2019 to excavate Etel, that is biblical Ai, for ourselves. And so we were able to expose the evidence and look at, does this evidence confirm the biblical record or contradict the biblical record? Was Garstang right or was Callaway right? And essentially what we were digging for was the evidence that could answer the problem of I once and for all. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll leave a link in the description where you can order a copy of my book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence, which is #1 in archaeology. I'll also leave a link where you can make a donation. These are greatly appreciated and used for the production of future videos. The location of I is obvious, since Genesis 12:8 says that Abraham pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. So this shows that these two biblical cities of Bethel and Ai are close to each other and east and west of each other. Now Bethel had been excavated, it had been clearly identified. I did a video on Bethel that you can watch after this, and it became an anchor point in biblical archaeology. In other words, since the location of Bethel was known so well, other biblical cities could be found based on where they were located in accordance to Bethel. None easier than the city of Ai. According to the Bible, from ancient Bethel, all we have to do is travel east, and soon we'll come to the fortified city of Ai. We can see what this area currently looks like using this aerial footage. The ruins of ancient Bethel are under this town. When we fly east, we soon come to a distinct mound of ruins of a walled city known locally as Etel. Obviously, this is Ai. In fact, Etel means the ruin, just as Ai also means ruin. These are the reasons why, for a very long time, scholarship has identified Etel as biblical Ai. It's obvious. And so the problem of Ai is not in its location, and nor is it in the topography of the area. In his article, Zevet wrote, "In the course of my visits to Etel, I have been struck by the astounding extent to which the topographical details of the Battle of Ai and the biblical accounts can be identified on the ground." So to learn about the topography of this land and how it fits the biblical record, we'll go through the story of the second Battle of Ai, which is found in Joshua 8. And then we'll look at aerial views as well as 3D animation, which, keep in mind, is based on the actual topography of this area. After conquering Jericho, the Israelites attacked the city of Ai but lost the battle. The second Battle of Ai is described in Joshua chapter 8. This time Joshua's plan was to set an ambush behind the city. And so Joshua sent them, that is the ambush troops, out at night. Early the next morning, Joshua mustered his army and marched before them to Ai. The entire force that was with him marched up and approached the city and arrived in front of it. They set up camp north of Ai, with the valley between them and the city. Directly north of Etel is a wide ridgetop, ideal for setting up a large military camp. This fits the description for where Joshua's main army camped in plain sight of the city. In the next shot, I'm standing here. I'm standing on a ridge north of Ai. You can see a valley coming in behind me here that separates out this north ridge that I'm standing on, and then the Bronze Age ruins of the city of Ai on the southern side of that valley. If I walk over here, we see this open area with all these olive trees in here, and this is the logical place for the campsite of Joshua and the Israelites, since it's described as being north of the city of Ai with the valley between them. Verse 12 says, Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city. Just to the west of Etel is this hill. And from its southern slope, neither Bethel or Ai could be seen. and it's a large enough area for 5,000 men to hide. So I'm standing up on a hill that is west of the city of Ai. This is the one that makes sense geographically for Ambush Hill, because on the backside of this hill, an army, which there were 5,000 men, could not be seen from either Bethel or from the city of Ai. So the soldiers took up their positions, with the main camp to the north of the city and the ambush to the west of it. That night Joshua went into the valley. Before we continue the story of the Battle of Ai, we want to make sure we understand the topography. To the west we have the city of Bethel, and nearby and east of Bethel is the city of Ai. Ambush Hill is west of Ai, and on the ridge to the north was Joshua's main camp, with the valley between them. Further east is the desert wilderness and the Jordan Valley, called the Arabah in Hebrew. Here's how the topography currently looks. Ambush Hill, the ruins of Bethel and Ai, the valley that separates Ai from Joshua's main camp to the north, and further to the east, the wilderness and Arabah. Joshua 8:14 says, "When the king of Ai saw this," referring to Joshua's army to the north of the city, "he and all the men of the city hurried out early in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah." Verse 15 continues, "Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled toward the wilderness." This barren desert area is the wilderness. The Israelites fell back towards it to the east. The biblical account continues, "All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel." So notice that it says not a man remained either in Ai or Bethel. And so it makes sense that when the king of Ai in the morning saw Joshua and the Israelites camped out north of the city, that he would have sent a runner down the road to Bethel to get the men from Bethel as reinforcements. And then all of them went after Israel. And this is why it's important that from the position on the backside of Ambush Hill, that this place was not visible from either Bethel or Ai. Joshua 8:18 says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'Hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city.' So Joshua held out toward the city the javelin that was in his hand." This is my good friend Zach, and shop owner here in Jerusalem, and he is showing me this, which is the head of a spear, a javelin head, like the one that Joshua would have held up towards Ai during that battle when they were defeating the city of Ai. This is from that basic period.
This one is found in Judea, yes?
Verse 19 says, "As soon as he did this, the men in ambush rose quickly from their positions and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it, and quickly set it on fire." So imagine 5,000 men coming over the top of this hill, and the city being left open and rushing and attacking the city and then quickly setting it on fire. Verse 20 says, "The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up into the sky." This was the moment that the men of Ai realized they had been tricked, and that the Israelites saw that the ambush had worked. For when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city and that the smoke was going up from it, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. Those in the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle, with Israelites on both sides. Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivor nor fugitives. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. In his article, Zioni Zevet wrote, "These striking topographical details reinforce the conclusion reached on general geographic considerations that Etel is to be identified with Ai. In fact, they guarantee that the Ai story in the Bible was told about Khirbet Etel." All of this is not lost on John Garstang. He sees how the topography fits with the biblical account. This is why he takes a picture of the hill and puts it in his book, Joshua and Judges, and labels it the place of ambush west of Ai. He understood the location of Ai, he understood the topography of Ai, how it fit with the biblical record, and this is why he was the first to excavate there. So I'm standing at the site of Etel, this ancient mound that John Garstang excavated in 1928 and identified as the biblical city of Ai. Garstang had this picture taken of the mound and drew arrows on it that pointed out the different places he would dig, which he dated September 1928. He also drew this simple top plan of the site showing his excavation areas. The biblical date of Joshua's conquest is rounded off to 1400 BC. And this is archaeologically the late Bronze I period. After his excavations, Garstang reported, while as usual Middle Bronze Age wares were most abundant, there were found a considerable proportion of late Bronze I. He concluded that the site had been destroyed in 1400 BC in confirmation of the biblical date. One of Garstang's students was a young Jewish woman named Judith Marquette Krauss, and she was the next to excavate at Etel from 1933 to 1935. The Ai account of Joshua 8 ends with these verses. But they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. He impaled the body of the king of Ai on a pole and left it there until evening. At sunset, Joshua ordered them to take the body from the pole and throw it down at the entrance to the city gate. And they raised a large pile of rocks over it, which remains to this day. This pre-excavation photo shows a large pile of rocks on the west side of the Etel mound. This picture in Marquette Krauss's excavation report shows this massive pile of rocks, which was roughly 28 feet high, was over on the western side of Etel. And was this just a random pile of rocks, or was this the pile of rocks that the Bible is talking about? So over the course of a couple of seasons, Marquette Krauss's team removed this huge pile of rocks, and what was underneath it was a gate complex. This included a fortification tower next to it, the gate itself, and then this small sanctuary associated also with the gate. Now, just to make sure we understand, when we look at Etel today, this is where the pile of rocks was located. And underneath it was the western gate of the city of Ai. Flying towards the west, we approach the gate complex, where the pile of rocks was located before being removed. Underneath were the ruins of a fortification tower, and next to it, the city gate. You can see the passage for the drainage under the gate still right here where I'm standing.
I think there's a very good chance that that 6-meter high pile of stones over the citadel or gate area is the one that's mentioned in Joshua chapter 8. It's certainly a very odd feature, and that's the only textual explanation that we have for it.
Here we have this incredible, dramatic correlation between the biblical text and the archaeology, because the Bible says that the Israelites piled this massive pile of stones over the city gate of Ai, and then this massive pile of stones was identified on the western side of Etel, and when it was removed, what was underneath it? The main gate of the city. Now, after the 1935 season, Marquette Krauss fell ill, and tragically, her life was cut short. In 1936, she died of tuberculosis. She was only 29 years old. And so her excavations came out in a report long after her death. And it's difficult for this reason to really understand exactly what her interpretations of the archaeology were. You may be wondering after all this, okay, so what is then the problem of Ai? Because the location fits so well, the topography fits so well, and we have the archaeology Garstang found fitting so well. We have this pile of stones with a city gate underneath it found by Marquette Krauss. And the truth is there was no problem of Ai until the 1960s. The problem began with Joseph Callaway, who excavated Ai from 1964 to 1972 and claimed that there was no evidence of late bronze occupation at Etel. And this is a problem because the biblical date for the conquest is archaeologically in the late Bronze I period. So what Callaway found and reported contradicted what Garstang had earlier found and reported. Garstang said that he had found late Bronze I pottery in abundance, and then Callaway said that he had found no evidence for a late bronze occupation at Etel. Callaway's explanation was that Garstang had gotten it wrong, that he had misdated earlier pottery as late bronze pottery. The other thing that was confusing is it didn't really make sense why Joseph Callaway would have anti-Bible agenda or bias, since he was the professor of Old Testament at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Remember, Callaway had concluded that Ai is simply an embarrassment to every view of the conquest that takes the biblical and archaeological evidence seriously. The majority of scholars, such as Zioni Zevit, followed Callaway's interpretations, which is why he begins his Problem of Ai article by saying, "Extensive and sophisticated archaeological excavations have produced no evidence of human occupation at the site during the period when the Israelites supposedly settled in Canaan. In short, the evidence shows that there was no city of Ai for the Israelites to conquer." This is also why Dr. Bryant Wood, an evangelical biblical archaeologist who definitely believes in the Bible, went looking for Ai somewhere else. If Callaway couldn't find late bronze period pottery at Etel, then that must mean that Etel is not biblical Ai and that it's located somewhere else. And so he went and looked for another site. He settled on a nearby site just to the southwest of Etel called Khirbet el Makatir, and he excavated that site and became convinced that Makatir was biblical Ai. And this is when my own personal wrestling with this problem of Ai begins, because I moved my family to Israel in 2007, and not long after that, I started working with Dr. Wood at Khirbet el Makatir. This is Khirbet el Makatir. The excavated ruins seen here, as the excavation report says, are from the late Hellenistic, early Roman, and Byzantine periods, when there was a walled town on the site. This structure, however, Dr. Wood considered to be much earlier, and it was interpreted to be the western side of the city gate of Ai that dated to the time of Joshua's conquest. In fact, this structure was considered the main evidence that Makatir was biblical Ai. So I'm standing at Khirbet el Makatir. We have a structure here. This was believed to be the late Bronze I gate of the city of Ai. And I believe that for many years. I excavated here with my mentor, Dr. Bryant Wood. However, I brought several experts out here, 3 in particular, 1 a geologist and 2 archaeologists, and all 3 of them, independently of each other, immediately when they saw this, identified it as a Byzantine wine press. The purpose of this structure became obvious when in front of it, 2 plastered vats for holding the juice from pressed grapes were unearthed. In the excavation report, the structure is identified as a wine press, and a picture of it after being excavated shows the 2 plastered vats in front of it. Team member Lane Rittmeyer drew this reconstruction to show how this wine press was used. Despite all of this, the original interpretation was not abandoned, since the report claims that the wine press operated inside a repurposed western chamber of the Bronze Age city gate. This argument was rejected by the experts I brought out to the site. They could clearly see the Byzantine wine press, but they couldn't see a late Bronze Age city gate at all. This Iron Age gate at Hatzor shows us an example of what an excavated city gate looks like from the air, with gate chambers on either side, a passage in the middle, and city walls attaching to them. In contrast, even though the area has been excavated at Makatir, all that can be seen is a single structure. No trace of multiple chambers, or a passage, or the other side of the gate, or connecting city walls can be seen. All that can be seen is the structure used as a Byzantine wine press. And so I lost my faith in Makatir as being the biblical site of Ai. While I was working at Makatira, I met a young man named Titus Kennedy, and I invited him to come and stay in my apartment with my family, and we became friends. And over time, it came out that we had both, independent of each other, come to the realization that Khirbet el Makatir could not be biblical Ai. With the remains of houses and late bronze pottery, Makatir may have been a small village, but not the fortified city of Ai. And so this set us in motion to go, okay, let's go find where Ai is then. And this led us to Bethel, and then from Bethel over to Etel and the excavations of Garstang and the evidence that we've already gone over. And it became obvious to us, as it had to these scholars in the past, that Etel had to be the biblical site of Ai. But what was, of course, confusing was, why couldn't Joseph Callaway find any late bronze pottery there? So one day I was reading the obituary of Joseph Callaway on the seminary website, and I read that in 1961 he had studied under the famed archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon. And when I read that, all of a sudden the lights went on and I understood what the problem of Ai actually was. It wasn't the archaeology, it was the archaeologist. So let me explain this, and bear with me because this is important. When I first met Dr. Brian Wood, I flew him over to Israel because I was working on a video called Jericho on Earth. That's on my YouTube channel here. You can watch it after this. And I had specifically brought Dr. Wood in because he's the one that solved the problem of Jericho. And the problem was that none other than John Garstang had excavated at Jericho and said that the evidence that he found there confirmed the story of Jericho in the Bible. And then later, Kathleen Kenyon came and excavated Jericho, and she said that it contradicted it. She claimed that she found no late bronze pottery at Jericho, and that there was no occupation there was no city for the Israelites to conquer. In other words, the problem of Jericho is identical to the problem of Ai. The solution to the problem of Jericho was simply put by Dr. Wood as that Garstang had been right and that Kenyon had been wrong.
I'm just saying John Garstang had it right, Kathleen Kenyon had it wrong.
And so the same would be true then at Ai, that Garstang got it right and Callaway, who was trained by Kenyon, got it wrong. So my archaeology professor, Dr. Shimon Gibson, said to me one day when I was talking to him about Ai, he said, well, if John Garstang said that he found late bronze 1 pottery, then he found late bronze 1 pottery. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he explained that John Garstang was one of a very small handful of scholars, the three main ones being Vincent, Albright, and Garstang, who developed pottery chronology that is still in use to this day. So you can't argue that Garstang did not know his pottery. He was one of the critical scholars who developed the pottery chronology. It was Kenyon and Callaway who got the pottery wrong, not John Garstang. Another thing that I learned from a seminary professor was that back in the 1960s, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary had gone through a liberal phase, and many of the professors there were liberal. Now, I don't know for sure if the motivation behind the interpretations by Joseph Callaway were based on him being liberal, or if he had simply been taught wrong by Kenyon and then passed that along. Whatever the situation is, what I did know was that Joseph Callaway is the one that got the pottery wrong. Now, amazingly, in 2019, we got the opportunity to excavate at Etel ourselves. By this time, Titus Kennedy had his PhD and was the director of the dig. This is the first square we dug, just inside the ancient city wall line. On the Acropolis of the Etel Mound, we excavated a second square here. These are the ruins of the western city gate, and just to the north of it and inside the fortification wall, we dug a third square. As we dug down into our squares at Etel, it was so obvious. I mean, we came across these layers that were literally filled with late Bronze 1 pottery, and then into a destruction by fire, a layer filled with black ash. This burned destruction layer can be seen running along the side of the square. Here is a closer view of it. This was the end of this late Bronze city. Next, on the southeast part of the mound, we put in a fourth square.
So we're coming down on a level here. You can see the charcoal flakes. It's hard packed. It's a different color. It looks like there's a destruction level here. There's charcoal in the floor.
Here we dug deep before reaching the same burned destruction layer.
We didn't just find a few scattered sherds here and there of Middle and Late Bronze Age pottery, but we found an abundance of it in every square that we excavated. It's interesting that Joseph Calloway claims there was no Late Bronze Age pottery at Etel, or no Late Bronze Age occupation, because if you look in his material and even in his reports, you will see samples of Late Bronze and even Late Bronze Age 1 pottery. Why I think that he made the conclusions that he did is that he was influenced heavily by Kathleen Kenyon, who had actually trained him previously. I think that all the expeditions that have been done at Etel have actually vindicated Garstang's original assessment of the site from his 1928 excavations. I'm completely convinced that Khirbet Etel is the site of Biblical Ai because of the occupational periods that we found there, because of all the geography, the size of the city, architecture like the gate, and some very interesting features such as a fire destruction and a pile of stones 6 meters high over the gate area.
In his article, Zioni Zevet had concluded, whether the story of Ai is historically accurate, however, is not important. What is important is the meaning of the story. The Bible says that the events that happen in the Bible are actual historical events. And so if the Battle of Ai never took place, then that would mean that the Bible was a false witness. So the only way that the account of Ai in the Bible has meaning and significance is if it really happened. The solution to the problem of Ai is that there is no problem of Ai. The location, the topography, and the archaeology all fit brilliantly with the descriptions in the Bible. And this shows that Etel is to be identified with the biblical city of Ai. So in the past, Joshua came and conquered the city of Ai. In the future, Jesus will also come as a conqueror of the earth, and the earth will suffer the same fate that the city of Ai has suffered in the past. In the story of Ai, it's the king of Ai who suffers this severe punishment. He's placed on a pole, presumably outside the city gate, because afterwards his body is thrown in the city gate. And it says in Deuteronomy 21:23 that anyone who's hung on a pole is under God's curse. And so we see the king of Ai suffering this punishment under God's curse in the story of Ai. However, in the New Testament, it's Jesus who is the king of the world who is hung on a pole in his crucifixion outside the city gate of Jerusalem. He willingly goes under God's curse so that that curse could be broken over us and we would receive a blessing, the blessing of salvation instead. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll leave a link where you can order a copy of my book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence. Thanks for making it number one.
All right, well, we'll stop there. And so anyway, it speaks for itself. Again, you have the website. You can go online and re-look at these for yourselves. There is also alternate views online as well that you can look at as well. But that was I thought that was very interesting. And the thing is, we read these stories and we always kind of imagine how this would be, but it's a wonderful thing we can actually, in our day, by way of internet, go and actually see the video and the maps of these different places, and then you can piece together, the chronology and the geography of the stories. So good story, and we'll continue Joshua, some things in archaeology concerning Joshua in the next couple of lessons.